Hey guys, this is Eric Tarr for theproaudiofiles.com. I've been going through a series of videos where I'm looking at techniques that you can use to analyze your audio plugins or your effects processors. My first video, I looked at a category of plugins that you could call spectral processors and how you can use a frequency sweep or other types of test signals to understand how those processors are going to work. Then I moved on to my next video to looking at saturation and distortion plugins, how you can visualize the harmonic content that's going to be created by those processors. Now in this video, I'm going to move on to dynamics processors and look specifically at compressors. So in this video, I hope to demonstrate the basic functionality of how a compressor works, then also do a side-by-side comparison of popular types of compressors so you can see their similarities and differences. If you need a quick crash course on what a compressor is and how it works, check out some of my other videos or also some of the things that I've written about in the past to get up to speed on what a compressor actually does. So let's jump into the session so I can show you what's going on here. I'm going to be using two test signals in this demonstration, and I've synthesized them specifically to be useful for analyzing a compressor or dynamics processor. So here's my first test signal. It's a 4-second long signal. There's 1 second of silence at the beginning and 1 second of silence at the end. Then what I've done is I went in here and I synthesized a step signal. So right at time second 1, the amplitude is going to increase and it's going to have a constant amplitude for 1 second. Then at the end of that 1 second, what I've done is I've changed the amplitude. I've stepped the amplitude down to a different amplitude, a lower amplitude. And I've done this specifically so that I can set the threshold of my compressor in here so that it's going to kick in when the amplitude changes here at time second 1. I can set my threshold so that this part of the signal is above the threshold and this part of the signal is below the threshold. Then I can look at the attack characteristics here at the beginning when it first goes above the threshold, and then I can look at the release characteristics here when the signal's amplitude goes below the threshold. I've done a similar kind of thing over here with this other test signal, where what I've done is I've made another 4-second signal, 1 second of silence at the beginning, 1 second at the end, but instead of using a step signal that we can't really listen to, I decided to use a 1 kilohertz tone. And so it actually it oscillates, it has a frequency, we can perceive it. It can go through our processor and we can look at what it's going to do. So it has one constant amplitude for the first second here, and then a lower amplitude, but still the same frequency when I start the next second. So for demonstration purposes, when I'm using this step kind of signal, I'm going to mute the output because it's not really helpful to listen to. All it's going to generate is just clicks and pops here whenever the amplitude transitions. But I'll try to remember to bring the signal in so we can listen to it when I have the 1 kilohertz tone over here. So let's go ahead and print some signals. I've got these sound files or these test signals loaded in on this track up here at the top called input. I'm going to send these signals through various compressors that I've got inserted over here. Then I've bused the output from the input track over here to the output track where I made the input of this the bus. So I can record this signal and visualize what happens to it after it gets processed by this compressor. So for instance, if I just dial up some attack time here of 300 milliseconds and then a release of 1 second, I've got it set up here as a ratio of 100:1 or in limiting mode. You'll see that I've got the threshold set over here so that part of the signal goes above and part of the signal goes below. So I'll go ahead and print this and you can see how it looks. Let me get this out of the way. All right, so I've taken my stair-step input signal, I've printed through the compressor, and you can see with an attack time of 300 milliseconds and a release time of 1 second, what this kind of signal is going to look like after it gets compressed. So we have some time at the beginning where the amplitude is not changed, but then we have this smooth ramp that happens based on this attack time that I set. So it doesn't transition linearly, and it also has a constant time at the beginning. It has a smooth transition there until it reaches its final limiting state. So I've also got these grid lines here. Hopefully you can see this in the video on YouTube. These grid lines are every 10 milliseconds. So there's 10 divisions here between time second 1 and time second 2. So that should give you a better idea about seeing when the attack time and release times actually occur. So now when the signal drops below the threshold, I've got the release set here at 1 second. You can see the transition that happens where this part of the signal is actually being reduced in amplitude until it reaches its final steady state level. So I can manipulate some of these things, parameters, and see what happens. So keep in mind here, I'll first manipulate the release time and watch if I lengthen it, what ends up occurring, and then if I shorten it. So I can go ahead and print this one again quickly. I can move it to 4 seconds is the maximum. Watch the transition now. Okay, so the transition takes a longer period of time. I can shorten it up. You can see that the release time now is much shorter at the beginning relative to this 1 second of signal. Let me go back to 1 second here. Oops. Should be 1,000 milliseconds. Great. Now let's look at the attack time. I have it set at the maximum right now. I can shorten that one down maybe to around 100 milliseconds. See what that one ends up looking like. Shorten it a little bit more. Maybe down to a few milliseconds. All right, you can see that the attack now is going very quickly to settle on the steady state level. I can zoom in. You can see the transition that's occurring very, very quickly here. Why don't I crank the attack all the way down to its fastest setting? Have a look at this. All right, so even at 10 microseconds, oops, I should click on this first. Even at 10 microseconds, you can see the kind of transition that ends up happening. Why don't I experiment with some of these things over on the sine wave so we can actually listen to them as well. So I'll back this one off. We can listen to the sine wave, what it's going to sound like. All right, so you can see the transition that occurs over here. This time, why don't I speed up the attack and look at different ratios here. So I'll start out at limiting. Now watch what happens when I back off the ratio. You'll see that this level, instead of being at the actual threshold of my compressor, it's going to move up a little bit more. So how about 10 to 1 to begin with? Still a lot of compression taking place, but as I get into this range of 3 to 1, and down to maybe 1.5. Right, the compression becomes less dramatic. There's less gain reduction that's occurring. The different attack and release times stay constant, but you can see how much gain reduction is going to take place for here 1.5 versus limiting. All right, what I like to do next is move on and show you different types of popular compressors and give you a side-by-side comparison and show you how they're going to work. So I'll go ahead and make this stock plugin inactive. Bring up my first one. This is a plugin from Softtube and Native Instruments. This is a DBX 160 style compressor. Here you have a threshold, and then you also have the compression ratio. But here you don't have the attack and release times. Those things are hidden. Those are, happening behind the scenes for you. You can't really set them. So if you want to understand the attack and release times of this compressor, well, you could use a test signal to get a better idea about how they're going to work. So why don't I here send the sine wave signal through it first, have an idea about what it's going to do. All right, so with this type of compressor, you're stuck with whatever the attack and release times are for how it's going to sound, but you can manipulate compression ratio. So I'll back this off a little bit, see how that's going to work. Right? Similar to how the ratio setting was changing with the other plugin, the main parameter that you can adjust here along with the ratio is the threshold. So you could lower it, you could raise it up so that you can change what part of the signal is going to be compressed versus not compressed. All right, so let me go ahead and move on from the DBX 160, show you the LA2A style compressor. So here's one from Waves. It's the CLA2A. I've already dialed in the peak reduction and makeup gain for this one here. Then I can manipulate compression and limiting settings. You don't have attack and release, so we can visualize what this is going to do and listen to it as well. Let me select this. Here we go. So the LA2A is known for having a little bit longer attack time. If I zoom in here, you can see my signal and how it's going to transition from the original level down to its compressed level. Then look at the release time. LA2A is known for having a long release, and that's being demonstrated here by the fact that it takes, at least this full second for it to transition, if not more, back to its released level. So that's your LA2A style compressor, a little bit different than a DBX. Certainly a longer release time here. The attack time is a little bit different as well. So let me disable this one. Bring up 1176 style. So this is the FET compressor from Soft Tube. I set up the input. Now in this case there's no threshold setting that you can set. So I'm just working right now with the input so that this part, the first part of my signal, is above the threshold and this part is below. Then I can manipulate ratio, attack and release. So I'll start out really fast attack and release. Look at what this one's going to do. So right at the beginning, it's going to grab that transient very, very quickly. Very fast attack time. If this is 1/1000th of a second, then you can see that right off the bat, it's going to grab that transient very quickly. I can also back off this attack time. You can see what's going to do. Just a little bit slower. It's always with 1176 going to be pretty quick on the attack time. So even if I go to the slowest setting on the attack, you can see still only a few cycles before the compressor really grabs onto it. Can also lengthen the release. Slow that down. You can see that the release can be very, very long. See how the transition is occurring for over 1 second right here, even around a ratio of 8. Still taking a very long time to recover. So that can change dramatically how it's going to sound. Now I can bump up the ratio here to maybe 12:1, increase the attack here. One thing about the FET compressor to know, or 1176 style, is typically when you manipulate the ratio, it's also used to manipulate the threshold. So if you have a button 1176 where you have the different ratios that you press by a button, those things can manipulate what the threshold level is. So even though I'm here at a level of 12:1, right, you can see what's going to happen here with the transition from uncompressed to compressed. All right, the last one I'll demonstrate, if this is the 1176, is another popular one. I think it's not based off one specific compressor, but maybe a combination of several types of compressors. This is the FG-401 from Slade Digital. It has a cool thing that happens with the transformer, dialed in threshold, attack, and release, all these things ahead of time. And I can listen to the signal after it goes through this type of processor. So here we go. So this is pretty fast attack for the signal here at the beginning, just a few cycles before we start to transition. This is on a medium attack time for this compressor. I can even speed it up and look how fast it can go. And slow it down. right? Look at the release time. It's happening currently very quickly. See how much longer it's going to take here. The one thing that I noticed that's kind of unique about this particular plugin compared to some of the other ones that I was doing is with this transformer button engaged, it actually starts to create some kind of these ripples here in the signal. If I zoom in on it, you can see that there's maybe some ripples that start to occur in the signal. I have to do some more investigating to see exactly what's going on there. But if I turn this transformer off, what ends up happening is it's much more smooth, much more like the stock plugin. Right? Not as many ripples or anything like that going on here after the signal starts to settle down. So without further investigation, it's kind of difficult to say what exactly is going on. Nonetheless, you can visually see that there's some different things that are happening to the signal when you engage that transformer button. I hope that this video gave you some better ideas about how a compressor works, how you can visualize what it's going to do to a signal, and then also side by side, what's the difference between 1176 versus the LA2A? Is the long release time of the LA2A, what does that actually look like when you send like a test signal through it that has a constant amplitude? So until next time, take care guys, and stay tuned for more videos coming up here in the near future.